All right, welcome into another edition of Carp's Corner. And as always, man, we had a great football weekend, probably even a crazier post weekend when you start looking at, or post Saturday, when you start looking at all the coaching moves and everything that has potentially happened that have kind of rocked the college football landscape. A lot of things are going on, a lot of movers, a lot of shakers. And it's going, this little coaching wheel, this carousel, if you will, is going to completely disrupt, I think, a lot of the excitement around some of the playoff expansion, around some of the conference realignment, as all these schools are jockeying to try to figure out who is going to be their next coach, who can be that next guy that can shepherd them through the college football playoff, through the playoff expansion, and ultimately bring them a national championship. So there's a lot really to get into, a lot to dive in with all this. Starting off, Lincoln Riley, USC. I think that's one of the big stories here that everybody has been diving into because it came as such a shock. I think if anybody believed Lincoln Riley was leaving, it's kind of tied to LSU, potentially Florida, but a lot of the noise over the last week was in regards to LSU and him potentially going to coach of the Tigers. And I'm sitting here thinking about this and trying to figure out, like, does that make logical sense? Is that a move that, I would make? I try to put myself in the position of coaches and always ask, like, what's your why? I don't know Lincoln Riley, but he got handed a Cadillac job, and it wasn't that it was unwarranted. He was doing a really good job under Bob Stoops. Bob Stoops chooses to walk away, and with that, the job opens up, and it's handed to Lincoln Riley. All he did was make it to a couple of college football playoffs, have a couple Heisman Trophy winners, another finalist in there, and was really doing a pretty darn good job for the Sooners. Now, the movement into the decision for them to go to the SEC, well, that comes out here at the start of the season. So keep that in the back of your mind as we kind of go through this story about what's happening here, where Oklahoma had a lot of success this year, maybe not as much success as they're used to. Ultimately lose Bedlam, which will break the games down at the end, like we always do. But Lincoln Riley tied to LSU. I'm thinking, does he want to go to the SEC? Is that something that he would be interested in? He's at a pretty Cadillac job right now. You may love Oklahoma, hate Oklahoma. It's a top 5, top 10 job in all of college football. Now, maybe it's going to change a little bit with Oklahoma going back and now merging into the SEC, and we'll see how they shake up that conference and what that ultimately looks like with them in Texas leaving the Big 12. But without a doubt, it's one of the top 10 jobs. We're putting it up there with Ohio State, with Bama, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, USC, maybe throw Clemson, Oregon in there, but it's one of the premier jobs in all of college football. So any move made from college to college would be viewed almost as a lateral move, unless he would played, at Alabama, like Dabo Swinney has played there, and you're thinking, okay, maybe he's now going home. He's going to coach at a place where it's more than just about money. It's more than just the size and power of the program. If you can kind of marry those things together and it's where you're from, like, don't ever underestimate like how important it is, when people really care truly about something and have strong feelings for it. But I didn't feel like Lincoln Riley had a place like that. There wasn't something that was going to sway him one way or another because of that. So it seemed like he was going to be more or less a lifer at OU, unless he elevated and went to the NFL. And if you remember, after the Cowboys fired Jason Garrett, there's some talks about him potentially taking that job. It's his if he wants it. And honestly, I'm like, I don't know if he's an NFL guy. It does seem intriguing. He's a young coach, like not even in his early 40s, late 30s. I mean, is that something he'd want to explore now or in the next couple of years? I could have seen it happening. But I didn't see him taking another job. And I didn't see him taking the USC job. And he never really openly denied it, because really publicly he was only asked about LSU, but there was some feelings around the program that I think that there was some uneasiness the last week and a half, 2 weeks. OU's working on a deal for him, an extension. They're trying to, bring him there, and rightfully so. A lot of these coaches right now, a lot of the schools are paranoid. There's some big jobs that opened up. Florida was open, USC was open, LSU was open. People are looking around thinking, okay, we better lock our guys down or else they'll go somewhere else or develop a wandering eye. So you saw it happen with James Franklin. You saw it happen with Mel Tucker. A lot of these coaches then use it to leverage to get some more cash in schools. Well, they're more than happy to oblige because this is going to give them the security moving forward. And so, this extension appeared imminent in Oklahoma. It seemed like that thing was going to be moving on. And then a day after the loss to Bedlam, he drops this out here that he's going to USC. And the first thing that popped in my mind as I was thinking about this, well, the SEC move is on the horizon. Is this something that he doesn't want to deal with? If he didn't take the LSU job, I would rather take USC. And I think the USC is a great job. I think LSU is a better job, more competitive, higher expectations, more competitive on the field, more difficult to recruit as far as the battles. Now you got great in-state talent at LSU, and they always have great players. But the SEC, I mean, it's real. It's the real deal. They pack their stadiums. You're not packing stadiums on the West Coast. Oregon, Washington, Utah. That's what I've been told by people on the West Coast. They sell out. Everybody else doesn't. And so how much do some of these schools really care about football? I know they say they do, but you are what you emphasize. And it doesn't feel like there's a huge emphasis being laid at some of these programs for their desire to go and be successful and try to win national championships. The men of Troy and USC, well, that's always been a little bit different with their rich history they've had, but they're not really selling out the Coliseum. It's not even close to being full like it was, during the Pete Carroll run and the end of that era there. And it just seems like there's apathy towards it. Even when they've had some runs with Sam Darnold and they've been better, it doesn't seem like USC is that great of a job. But with the expansion of the college football playoff, if you're in a Power 5 school, you're always going to get there. And if you're Lincoln Riley, look, I'm at USC. I should be able to out-recruit Oregon for the most part. They're my biggest competition. UCLA in with the city sharing that a little bit. Chip Kelly's there. Okay, maybe that. But you should be able to get the premier talent, and it's in a very weak conference. And so it's going to have an easier path to get to the college football playoff. And that's the first thing that I thought of. And just, kind of picking people's brains around the Sooner program. I think that there is an element of truth that they think that that's it as well. And so while everybody thought this move for Oklahoma to the SEC is going to bring more money, better games, be more competitive, you're getting out of the Big 12, all these good things. It's going to be a windfall of greatness, maybe some bumps in the road early on, but we have our young coach. He's going to be here for the next 15, 20 years. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to be moving to a conference. Your coach is gone. You're going to be replacing him, and everything doesn't seem so hunky-dory. And so the move that was supposed to kind of secure everything up and make it better has actually probably made it worse. And I think that it's just that he views it as an easier path and really didn't want to have to deal with it. And if I'm Bob Soups, I'm upset because I went and I vouched for this guy, made him a made man, kissed him on the cheek and said, hey, this is the guy to take over for me and to move this program in the right direction after the 20 years that I shepherded it. And so I think there's probably some level of disappointment because I don't think Lincoln Riley was very forthcoming with people close to him about, his, lack of a better word, wandering eye. Because I believe there was even overtures with LSU as well. And it turns out now that I think people in Louisiana are even upset. Hey, maybe play them against USC to try to garner the best deal. So there's a lot of people that Lincoln Riley has ticked off, says goodbye to his players. I don't know the sincerity of that. That's between him and them. But it seems like he's kind of running from Oklahoma to get to an easier path at USC. And even maybe brought LSU along and drug them into the mix as well. Looking at some of the coaching candidates, Brent Venables is the odds-on favorite right now. You got Lane Kiffin after him. Mark Stoops, Bob's brother at Kentucky, done some really good things there. I think he'd be a good hire. Matt Campbell at Iowa State. He's been linked to just about every job. I think Venables would be probably interested in it. I think he has a pretty good relationship with the AD out in Oklahoma. So I do think that's intriguing, going back to a defensive guy. And one of the things that everybody always talks about is one of these offensive gurus. Being a head coach is not about being a guru. It's about being a leader of men. It's about assembling the right staff, developing the right culture, bringing in the right players, making sure that things are run the way that they're supposed to run, making good in-game decisions. You can't be a putz or a buffoon. Even some coaches can, but they recruit really well, so they overcome that a little bit. But if you have the right assistants and all those things, yeah, it's important for you to understand the game. But managing the game and managing the program is more important than being, a quote guru, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think as we've seen this, you look, Nick Saban, not an offensive guru. Kirby Smart, not an offensive guru. Dabo Swinney, offensive guy. I don't think anybody, is saying that he's had the most innovative offense in the world. He lets his coordinators handle that for the most part. Bob Stoops, you could throw in that mix. Ed Orgeron, who, maybe not even great at managing, but, great at recruiting and hyping dudes up. And so you look at all these guys who have won national championships and have been really successful, like Lincoln Riley, you would say that. Urban Meyer, he had his offensive system, but not really what you would say an innovative offensive guru. He brought in coaches who were able to do that and innovate. And so I don't think you need this offensive guy. Matt Campbell does a great job at Iowa State. It's about culture. It's about developing talent, developing players. So, recruiting, getting the right staff in there. It's not about, you want to be innovative and you want to make sure that you've got good stuff going on, but hiring guys who are great at diagnosing and diagramming plays, figure all this stuff out, it can work, but I would be much more happy to hire a leader. That's what I would be looking for if I was an AD. Brent Venables, I think, checks that box. See him as a head coach. He's been a DC at Clemson a long time. Don't know if he could handle Oklahoma. He's got ties there. Maybe that's something that works. Lane Kiffin, well, he's an offensive guru. He's been a head coach for a while. If he wants to leave the SEC and kind of do the flip, and head over to Oklahoma and build them up as they come in, sure, he'd be taking over a pretty good job, pretty sweet place. I think that Mark Stoops hiring is intriguing. Matt Campbell, and then also Luke Fickell. I don't think Fick would take very many jobs, especially, outside of the Big Ten Midwest footprint. I think Oklahoma would be intriguing because it'll be in the SEC, but it's not your Florida, your Georgia. Fans are passionate, but I do think that there's just a little different element. So I think that one would be intriguing to him. He's an Ohio guy. Bob Stoops is an Ohio guy. Let's never underestimate. So is Matt Campbell, the connection that people have when they all are from the same region and honest conversations and frank conversations that can be there. So Brent Venables, I think, is the odds-on favorite. I think Mark Stoops or Matt Campbell would make a lot of sense too. And it wouldn't surprise me if he went there. I don't think it ultimately gets to Fick. And I don't think they hire Lane unless they really just want to make a splash and have a guy who's talking all the time, which, that was never really Stoops or Lincoln Riley. So that would be kind of out of character, as you would say, for Oklahoma to make that move. The Florida job, filled now by Billy Napier, had a lot of success at Louisiana, 39-12. He's been right up there at the top of the conference the last 3 years. Interesting thing about Florida, if you look at this, their last three coaches, you got McElwain, you got Dan Mullen, and now you're hiring Billy Napier. Like all three of those guys, either, it's Saban, Urban, Saban ties. And so staying in there with guys who have had tremendous success, in the SEC as part of a good program. Napier, head coach, had done it before. So had Dan Mullen, so had McElwain. But we'll see if that success is more transferable now to Florida than it has been for the last two. Both of those guys had intermittent points where they were really good, just never really able to sustain it. And so Billy Napier, who a lot of people thought Louisiana, LSU, that seemed like a done deal. That's why I think the Lincoln to LSU tie had so much steam, because they weren't really pursuing Napier. If they weren't, like, okay, well, then it had to be Dave Aranda. Dave Aranda appears to be staying at Baylor. Now, maybe that all changes, but they've got an extension they're working on for him. Or then, it looked like it was going to be Lincoln Riley. Well, Riley looks like he may have played him and jumped to the West. Napier's gone. Like LSU, there might be a little bit of a scramble right now. And if you're Oklahoma, you're in a scrambling because their recruiting class that was so highly ranked with some receivers, quarterbacks, a lot of elite players in the ESPN top 300. I mean, 24/7 Rivals, all these guys, like they had them way up there. And now it looks like it's falling apart a little bit. I believe 5-6 decommits already just upon hearing that news. So rough day for Oklahoma. Florida seems to have their guy. We'll see how that all checks out. Looking at some of the games this weekend, we'll start with Ohio State, Michigan, a game that's very near and dear to my heart. Ohio State, they got beat up front. I mean, that's the reality of it. both sides of the ball, weren't able to run the ball when they needed to, weren't able to stop the run when they needed to. And historically, I've talked about this, last 20 years, the team that has won the yards per rush has won this game. Whoever won that battle has won the game. You don't necessarily need to, rush for 297 like Michigan did, but when you need and want to run it, you have to be able to. And Ohio State opened the second half, 3 straight runs, 6 yards and a punt. I'm not disappointed that they ran the ball 6 times in a row. I'm more disappointed that when you run it 6 times in a row, you don't get 10 yards. Or run it 3 times in a row, you don't get 10 yards. You only get 6. And that's very disappointing because that's a toughness thing. That's a mentality. And when you're Michigan, they've been eating outside, been picking scraps for the last decade. Their players wanted to win this thing, just like the Ohio State players of the 90s into the early 2000s. And Ohio State had been eating at the buffet, and they've been watching them outside. And it had been so long since they remembered what it was like to be starving in this rivalry that I think you just take it for granted a little bit. That's human nature. It's going to relax you. And if you can't raise your game to meet their level of emotion, you're going to see what happened on Saturday. Ohio State had shots. They had chances to get in that game and go win it. But ultimately what came down to it, they didn't have it physically, the physical toughness, the mentality, that drive, desire, that desperation to be able to go get the win. Jim Harbaugh afterwards makes the comment about being born on third base, hitting a triple, kind of directed at Ryan Day, who took over for Urban and had a great program in his hands. I know about Ryan Day. He's heavily competitive, and that is not going to sit well with him for the next 360 days. And so he'll take a deep, long look at the program, figure out what needs to be changed, maybe make some changes on the staff. Some guys, who knows what's going to be happening here. There's a lot of chaos right now happening across college football. There might be some movement there, and with that, we'll see how it all settles out come January 1st, when a lot of those hires and everything will be in place, you would imagine. So making the comment, born on third base, think you hit a triple. Jim Harbaugh also said after the game, we move forward with humble hearts. Like, there's not a whole lot of humility in that statement. And so I know Ryan will be chewing on that thing for quite some time. Iron Bowl, Bama, Auburn. This is, to me, like Ohio State, Michigan underdog wins, 8-point dogs, 7-point dogs, huge underdog, 3-score underdog for Auburn. Almost found a way to win the game. You could argue that they should. Bama goes 97 yards to win the game at the end, capped off by a 28-yard Ja'Cory Brooks touchdown from Bryce Young. Like, get off, force them to drive the football. There's still time. And then the thing that's probably most frustrating is before that, Auburn goes 3 and out. Tank Bigsby runs it to a 3rd and 1, but he goes out of bounds. I think Bama had another timeout or two, but forced them to use it. I think that would have made them use their last timeout. Potentially then you could have ran some more time off of the clock, goes out of bounds, and it's a bad deal at that point. And Bama, give them credit, got control of it in overtime, and Auburn responded, but they just ran out of gas. If you're the team who's an underdog and a big underdog in a rivalry game, and you have the momentum, you have got to seize it. Getting that first down would have been huge, but burning clock and forcing timeouts is always so much bigger. Bedlam, it's Lincoln Riley's team played hard. It seemed like he'd checked out, as a couple of weeks ago from what people were saying out in Oklahoma. However, his team played well. They had a lead, and, remarkable comeback there for Mike Gundy. Kudos to him. It's only his 3rd win, and the 3rd win for Oklahoma State since 2005. It was a victory that they need to have happen. Now they'll take on Baylor, which we'll talk in the future, but a great win for the Mullet Man. Much more high scoring than I anticipated this game being, but 3rd win since 2005, getting it done. And last game, I want to touch on quickly, Minnesota beating Wisconsin. If you would have said what the odds were, there was Wisconsin, Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, I mean, they would have been ridiculous. You wouldn't have got any value on it, because why would Wisconsin not be able to beat Minnesota, especially when Iowa won and now Minnesota is playing for nothing. Once Iowa won, that sealed Minnesota's fate of them not being able to make it. All they did was go out there and hold Wisconsin and Braylon Allen, the talented freshman, to 62 rushing yards as a team, totally shut them down. Did a great job. Big win for PJ Fleck, who's celebrating his birthday here this week. So I know he's happy and feeling good about that. So big there. We have all the conference championship games set. We'll dive into that in the next episode. We'll get into probably this Ohio State situation a little more and maybe some of the changes that need to happen. But that is all for this edition in a rapid fire of Carp's Corner. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you next time.